Hey guys, this is Dave with Gazzadio. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Jcally AP20, which is a budget USB DAC. And since this device is so inexpensive and has so many features, I'm also going to be doing kind of a ultra budget portable DAC top picks update towards the end and tell you where I think the AP20 stands compared to the competition under $100. But first, let's go ahead and go over what's included in the box. Of course, we have the device itself. It also comes with a case, which is a little unusual, and it does not come with any USB cable, so it's just the AP20 and a case. As for the price, specifications, and features, this is where things start to get a little interesting. And what I want to do is go over the specs and features first, then I'll tell you the price, because I think you might be surprised. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Jcally's products, maybe it won't be a surprise because you already know they have a lot of devices under $100. So we'll go over the inputs, outputs, buttons, and knobs first. Now on the top, we have a Type-C input that acts strictly as an audio input. On the right side, we have a volume control. We also have a power button. On the left side, a gain switch, and also a switch that allows you to turn the internal battery power on or off, so you can choose whether or not you want the device to be powered by the source or to be powered by the internal battery. And then on the bottom, you get a 3.5, 2.5, and a 4.4 output. Finally, on the front is a charging indicator light and also an audio format indicator light. As for the power output, it gives you 330 milliwatts of power out of the 4.4 and 2.5 output, and 115 milliwatts out of the 3.5, which is plenty for IEMs. And it was also enough to drive basically all of my headphones decently, although of course there will be some harder to drive headphones out there that it might struggle with. And then moving to the internals, it uses dual CS43131 DAC chips. It can decode up to 32-bit PCM and DSD256. It also has a built-in 750 milliamp battery. Now, I know that's not a huge battery, but it is bigger than the 550 milliamp battery that's in my BTR5 2021, and it's not that much smaller than the battery in the BTR7, which I believe is an 880 milliamp battery. And as for playback time, it was giving me about 7 hours out of the 3.5, but only about 5 to 5.5 hours out of the balanced output. So of course that will vary depending on your volume level and which output you're using, which that is still pretty good. As far as the build, the housing is made out of a combination of aluminum and tempered glass, and it is a little on the large side, probably mainly due to the battery, but it's still fairly light and somewhat pocketable. Of course, it is much larger than your typical USB style dongle. So based on the AP20 specifications and features, when compared to most of the other portable USB DACs that I've owned, with this feature set, I would expect this to cost at least $100. And again, I know the sound is more important than the features, but this only cost $56. So even if it just sounds pretty good, this is automatically going to get my recommendation. And of course, if it sounds horrible, then it won't. So let's talk about that. Okay, let's talk about the sound of the AP20. So the AP20 uses dual CS43131 DAC chips, which is the same chip that's used in both the Tangent Space Lite and the Space, which is my current top pick under $100. It's also the same chip used in the Moondrop Dawn, which preceded the Tangent Space as my top pick under $100. So my point is that the CS43131 is a fairly commonly used chip in budget DACs. Of course, we know it's not necessarily about the chip as much as it is the implementation of the chip, because you can use a good DAC chip, and if it's not implemented properly, it can sound bad. So the question is how well is this implemented for this $56 price? And of course, I tested this with lots of different IEMs and headphones, not only trying to determine its general sound presentation, detail retrieval capabilities, and just how transparent it is, but also its driving capabilities and the background noise levels. We'll talk about its general presentation first, which is basically neutral or linear. So it doesn't lean cool or overly clinical, but it doesn't lean warm either. To my ears, it sits fairly comfortably between the two and has a reasonably transparent overall presentation for this price range. And what I mean by that is, it's generally on par with your average budget dongle under $100. Detail levels are also pretty good, and combined with its linear presentation, instruments and vocals not only sound pretty natural, but also have reasonably decent resolution and clarity. As for background noise levels, I tested the AP20 with my Zen Pros and 2020 Andromedas as usual, which are both extremely sensitive. And while I did hear just the slightest amount of background noise during the quietest parts of the music, or maybe when there was no music playing at all, for the most part, when music was playing, it was virtually undetectable. As far as drivability, again, with the 300 milliwatts of power from the 4.4 and 2.5, I had no problems driving my 300 ohm SV023s, although I did notice it struggling with bass dynamics out of the 3.5. The sound just seemed to thin out just a little bit in the low end out of the 3.5 with my SV023s. So before we go into comparisons, let's just kind of summarize what we know up to this point. We know the AP20 has lots of great features, reasonably good specifications, and a pretty good DAC chip for the ultra budget price range. And we also know its sound quality is at least on par with your average dongle under $100. But where exactly do I feel it lands in terms of value and performance compared to the competition? Well, on the table, I do have the ones that do fall within this price range, but I also have a couple more that are a little out of the price range. But the ones that I was mainly focusing my comparison were the Tantrum Space Lite, 7Hz 71, iFi GoLink, VO K2 and K1, and also the ICO ITM02 as well. So in terms of pure sound performance, I would say, again, it's good for the price category. However, I don't think it competes with my favorites like the Space and Space Lite. Again, only in terms of sound performance. It just seemed like the Space and Space Lite had slightly better dynamics. It also had a little better detail retrieval. Although I would say the AP20 handled the SV023s maybe a little better out of the 4.4 output compared with the 3.5 output of the Space Lite. But with IEMs, I would still give it to the Space Lite. I also feel like the VOK2 Moondrop Dawn just had slightly better overall sonic performance than the AP20 as well. Now that being said, the differences were ever so slight, and I do feel that the AP20's overall sonic performance is still fairly good for its price. But what makes it a good value is, again, it does have decent sound, but I think really what kind of puts it over the edge for this price range is the fact that it has a lot of features that you don't typically see at this price. And just to recap, it gives you 3 different output options, a 3.5, 4.4, and a 2.5, which they could have just offered a 3.5 and a 4.4, and that still would have been great. And the 4.4 gives you 300 milliwatts of power output, which will power most of your average full-size headphones. It also has physical power, gain, volume buttons, and last but not least, a built-in battery, so you don't have to worry as much about draining your source device. But the bottom line is this. While the sound isn't the best in the ultra budget category, it's still easily good enough in my opinion for this price, and it still has tons of really good features, again, that are rarely found at this price point, which makes this a very easy recommendation for me. So the AP20 does get my recommendation. But in the end, the Tantrum Space still holds the top spot as one of my top picks under $100, followed by the Space Lite and the Moondrop Dawn. So that concludes my review of the Jcally AP20. If you're new to the channel and you like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to go a step further, you can also support us through our Patreon. I'll be sure and leave a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this review. Please like this video. Please share this video. I hope you have an awesome day.